I'm sure. Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Bicep 0.4 launch. We have a bunch of people here, which is really, really awesome to see how the community continues to grow. The last time we did a call like this was for 0.2, and for 0.3 we did that at Ignite. So it's really awesome to see all the people here. I can't see the list of individual people, but I'm sure there's a lot of familiar faces. So it's good to see everybody. I'm here. My name's Alex Frankel. If you don't know me, I'm a program manager on the Azure deployments team, and I'm here with Stephanie Yen, who's also a PM on the deployments team with me, and Marcus Felling, who's a PM in developer division, also working on Bicep tooling. So let's get started. We have great demos for you and great content that we're really excited to share. So let's not delay. Post your questions in the event Q&A. We're going to keep an eye on the Q&A. We have a whole team of moderators and subject matter experts that are helping to answer, who are not going to be necessarily on camera today, but they are supporting this event and making sure it goes smoothly. So please don't hesitate to post things in the Q&A, and they can interrupt us as we're going to make sure we answer all the important questions. For those of you who may be kind of net new to the Bicep project, maybe you haven't started with it yet, or maybe you've just heard about it and are here in this call to kind of get started. Bicep at the highest level is a transpiler. It takes your Bicep code and turns it into ARM template code, and at that point it's just a regular ARM template, and you can deploy it wherever you can deploy ARM templates, and you can run what if against it, or the TTK against it, or run it in a pipeline, all the tooling that you're used to. And we're investing a lot in tooling for Bicep to make it such that you don't necessarily need to see the underlying ARM template before sending it to Azure. You can just work entirely within the Bicep language.
Sorry, Alex, real quick. Are we recording this?
It should be automatically recording, is my understanding of live events.
I wasn't able to start it, so maybe it is automatically.
I think it is. I don't see a recording button either where it normally is. So we're just going to assume that it is. If anyone in the Q&A has deep experience with Teams live events, please let us know if we're forgetting something crucial. But I think it's automatically recording.
We hope so, to answer the question.
We hope so. Okay, cool. A little bit on the goals, particularly if you're new to the project, we wanted to just go over these quickly. The goals of Bicep are really to lower the barrier to entry and improve the authoring experience as much as possible with better tooling and better syntax. We also want to be a transparent abstraction of the platform, and all that means is that we never want to hide any Azure goodness from you in Bicep. If it's possible through the ARM API and ARM templates, we want to make sure it's possible in Bicep. So there's nothing that we need to do to enable new resource types in Bicep. They're all available as soon as they're available in the API. And then we wanted to make sure that Bicep is really modular, and there's a first-class experience for code reuse, which is something that was difficult in ARM templates that we want to make sure is really easy in Bicep, and something that you'll continue to see us invest in over time. Some of the non-goals that are worth covering is, we don't want to be one language to rule them all. So we want to make sure that the Bicep experience is as great as it can be, and it's the best possible deployment experience to Azure. But we also want that to be true of all the other clients for Azure. So whether it's Terraform or Farmer or the SDKs or PSARM or what have you, we want to make sure that all that tooling is as good as it can possibly be. And our job as the Bicep team is just to make sure that that's true of Bicep in particular. And then we don't want Bicep to be, or we don't plan to have Bicep be a general purpose language to meet any need. So if you have particular like data processing needs, or you need to talk to external systems, it may be more appropriate to do that in another programming language or a script in a pipeline or something like that, and then feed that information to your Bicep deployment. Okay, so a little bit of context on where we are. If you've been with the project since its inception back in, I think September is when we made the repo public with our 0.1 release. 0.1 and 0.2 were like experimental releases, and we wanted to get the Bicep language out there as early as possible so that people could play with it and give us feedback on kind of the direction that we were headed, but it was experimental. It was not meant to be production ready. We were very comfortable shipping breaking changes or things of that nature. And it wasn't until 0.3, which we shipped at Ignite this past March, where we became production ready. And production ready meant that it was supported by Microsoft support plans, and it had parity with ARM templates. So anything that you can do in ARM templates, you can now do in Bicep. That doesn't mean you have to switch, or we're going to turn off ARM template support or anything like that. But if you are ready to make the jump, you will be supported, and there shouldn't be anything blocking you from achieving what you can achieve in ARM templates. With 0.4, what we're launching today is our first, post-production release. Leading up to our v0.3 release, obviously that was a pretty intense release. There was a lot of things coming in at the last minute to make sure that we had parity and the features that we needed. But there was a growing backlog of kind of like bugs and stability things that we wanted to focus on. And so we spent a lot of our energy on just fixing bugs, making sure that Bicep was as stable as it can be, in addition to some new features that we're excited to share with you. So the features that Marcus will demo in a little bit are really focused on like speeding up the inner loop of your Bicep development lifecycle. So there's really cool features like snippets and linting that will help you in context while you're authoring, so that you get a higher quality Bicep file faster. Okay, I'm going to go through what is actually in the 0.4 release, but Marcus has some great demos prepped where he's actually going to walk through all of these things and how they show up and how they work and how they're implemented, and we'll answer questions as we go. The first is the new Bicep Linter. So some of you have already played with it. We released 0.4 yesterday. And I've already seen some blog posts this morning, which is just awesome. So the linter is going to help you with code style and code quality. It's not going to catch things that will result in errors. That's for the core compiler, but it will catch issues that you should look out for, like making sure that you're not using string interpolation unnecessarily and things of that nature. We have resource snippets. So through the several 0.3.star releases, we've started introducing these snippets. If you're familiar with the snippets that were in ARM tools for authoring ARM templates, we're in the process of porting all of those over. We may actually be done with porting all of them over at this point, in addition to expanding and increasing the quality of the snippets. We're also taking community contributions for the snippets for the first time. So there's a formal system for submitting PRs with snippets, and we've seen the community take those up as well. We see a few snippets come in every couple of days, which is just great and really helps you author quickly. And there's some cool ways that we show you snippets in context as you're authoring to make sure you know that they are available. Resource and module scaffolding. This one's I'm particularly excited about. This has improved my inner loop quite a bit. So when you declare a resource, you declare the type of the resource that you want, and then you have to declare the body of the resource, including all required properties. And up until this feature existed, you had to start, pecking away at all the properties that needs to be there and we knew needed to be there, but someone had to write them. Now in one operation, you can scaffold out the entire body, whether that's for a resource or for a module, because we know the required properties for a module as well. So, and then you can just tab complete and type in all the values that you have. So that's really great. We have a new function called getSecret. This is for retrieving dynamic secrets for module parameters. So this was, we said we had parity in 0.3. This piece was like the last little piece that was missing to get us to true parity. This was an external contribution from Mick is his name, who we've been working with internally as well, has been an awesome contributor to the project. This was a big undertaking that took a serious amount of time. If you're familiar with the ARM template reference syntax, so when you create a nested deployment, you can, instead of passing a value, a hard-coded value, you can do a reference to a key vault. This is the equivalent of that functionality in Bicep, but it's more type safe because we build this off of having a key vault resource reference, so we can validate more upfront, and your authoring experience is hopefully more pleasant. So this is a fantastic addition. Thank you again, Mick, for getting this contribution done in time. And then we have a visualizer. This may not be widely known, but one of the engineers who worked on armviz.io, his name is Sheng Wang. He's now part of the Bicep and the ARM deployments team, and he obviously did a great job on armviz.io. He was able to take a lot of those learnings and leverage the Bicep language service to build a visualizer, which is just fantastic. So this is the first iteration of the visualizer for visualizing the resources that are going to be deployed, and it helps you see all the dependencies that Bicep understands that you no longer have to author in your Bicep code, but are still there. And so you'll be able to verify, oh, there is a dependency here. Bicep understands that dependency. So it's a really powerful tool, and we're excited to see where that goes. And then, as I mentioned, lots of quality improvements and bug fixes. There's just a ton. There's more here than we can list, and a lot of it is just catching more things up front, catching things that we know will result in runtime errors. We try to show as many of those things as possible in the extension while you're authoring. So you should just notice more and more of those things in your day-to-day experience. Okay, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Marcus, who's going to take the next 10 or 15 minutes to walk through all the cool features that I was able to list out. He gets the exciting job of demoing them all for you. So I'm going to send Marcus live. And I'm going to send his content live. Well, I'm going to send this live. And I can't switch the camera over to Marcus. But Marcus, I think you're off mute, right? They can hear you?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
A little bit of an echo, but yeah, test. Okay, echo's gone. All right, hey everybody. You ready for a workout? I'm flexing my bicep in the camera right now, but you can't see me, so bad joke. Sorry, but yeah, if you thought this was a Peloton class, you're in the wrong place. So let's look at some code here. All right, so yeah, presenters, if you want to come off mute if there's questions kind of as I go, since attendees can't come off mute, feel free to speak up. All right, so let's start out with what we're calling scaffolding that Alex mentioned. So if I want a storage account, I can type out the resource type as I normally would using the resource keyword. Can give it a symbolic name, the API version. And then when I get here to this equal sign, rather than inserting an empty body, I now have the option to insert all of the required properties. So this will insert all the required properties based on the resource types API spec. This way I don't need to open up the docs, insert one by one. So yeah, and then this also works on modules. So if I want to reference a new module, again, same thing here. This can insert all the required properties from that module, just like so. So manage it at any name, SQL Server admin login and password. I don't need to go and guess or even look at the module if I don't want to. Yeah, so that's scaffolding. Let's talk snippets. So everything prefixed with an RES here in IntelliSense is it's a resource snippet. So I can actually expand this. And as I tab through, I can see what would be inserted. So for my storage account example, I don't even need to type in the RES prefix. I can just type in ST, and I can see that top result is a snippet that I can use. So now after inserting that, I can tab through all the properties, modify what I need to. This works really well, if there's a bare minimum to get a proof of concept deployed, ASAP. It's just really quick and easy. So pretty cool. We have, I think, over 70 snippets available today. As Alex mentioned, we've had a bunch of contributions from the community, which is really cool. So let's talk about contributing a snippet. So I'm going to open up my browser. I'm just going to go to the docs page here. I need to switch my screen share. Give me a second here. All right, over to the browser. So at the root of the GitHub, the Bicep repo, I'll just go back a step here. There is a contributing Markdown file. In here, we've added a section for snippets. So a snippet can either be, a single generic resource, or it can be multiple resources. And we want to make sure that you're using the parent-child syntax. So starting out, you add the template itself. So go to this directory here. It's in the language server folder. And I'm just going to grab the AKS cluster snippet here. All right, so this is what the snippet template itself looks like. You can see this funky syntax here with the $ bracket, and that is for tab stops. So as you saw when I inserted the snippet, I could tab through and modify those properties kind of one by one. So this just designates that this is a tab stop kind of placeholder, right? And then there's 1 through 8 here. So those just kind of go in order, and then those align with the integration tests. So if I go back to the guide here, so after I add my template, I can add my integration test. And there's 2 files in here. Again, I'll go with the AKS cluster example. All right, there's a main.bicep file, and this has those tab stop placeholders. and values. So basically, the integration test is going to inject these values into the template that I just referenced, and it's going to make sure that that aligns with the other file here for the test, which is main.combined bicep. So you can see this already has all the values inserted. This could be, one of the many options for inserting this snippet. So those tests run, they do a diff, they make sure that they match up there. So those are the basics. That's kind of how the tests work. Any questions in chat yet?
I don't think anything specific to snippets yet.
Okay. Okay. Then next, I'm just going to show what a PR looks like. So after you have your template ready, the integration test ready, you can go to submit a PR. Recently, we had this PR come through for API management. There's a little guide when you create a PR. So, we ask that you go through this checklist, make sure everything's in order before you submit this PR. Want to make sure that there's not an equivalent snippet that's already out there. We require camel casing. For the placeholders in the template, the placeholders should align with the actual property names themselves. The symbolic name should always be the first tab stop. And then the resource name property should be equal to just a generic name. So you can call it whatever you want. But so yeah, this is what an ideal PR looks like. This is going to make it into the release. There's just 4 files that went along with this.
Hey, Marcus, there's a question in the chat if you could increase or zoom in to increase the font size.
Yeah, so this is that integration test, the combined bicep template. So it's all the values injected. Then it's, the integration test itself is going to do that diff and make sure that aligns with this template after all of these placeholders have been injected. Making sense so far?
Marcus, there's a question in the chat that I will publish. What does scaffolding look like if I scaffold, then update the module file with a new param? Do I get a yellow squiggle or anything?
Yeah, I can demo that. VS Code here. So let's say I have a module here. I'll start out with this commented, and then I'll reference this module. So if I insert all the required, so this is what I demoed earlier, and now if I go back, add that new required parameter, save the file, go back to storage. And let's see. So maybe I would need to reopen this. Let's see, did I save this? Okay.
Does it show up in IntelliSense?
Yeah, here we go. Okay, so I'm getting the red squigglies here on params. And it says the following object is missing required param. So that's the one I just added. So if I want to just remove this and use that scaffolding again, then I get that new required parameter that I just added. Does that answer the question?
It does.
All right, cool. All right, so let's talk about the visualizer. So I have a template here. I have a web app, SQL Server, database, managed identity, app insights, a whole bunch of stuff going on here. I can right click on this file now, open the visualizer. Give that a second. And then I get a nice visual here that I can rearrange. So I can see I have, some dependencies here between the SQL Server, the database, the firewall rules. There's a connection string pointing to the SQL Server. I have app insights. I obviously have a hosting plan. I have managed service identity, and then a role assignment. And I can kind of zoom in, zoom out here. I can have this open. As I'm authoring templates, this will update live. So kind of cool, as the architectures kind of grow in complexity, Visualizer is a great way to output that dependency graph, that your templates will produce. So any questions on the Visualizer? I can also open it with this little button up here.
There is one question, Marcus, about what the visualizer looks like with an existing resource instead of a new resource.
Oh, that's a good question. Let's try it out. So I was saving this demo for a little bit later, but it might work well for this. So here I have a key vault reference. It's using the existing keyword. So let's see what the visualization looks like here. All right, so it still shows up.
Nice.
I mean, yeah, I could do that in my other example too, just to kind of show. Let's see. I'll just paste it in here. Key vault. Okay, and I have an error because I haven't referenced this correctly, but it'll show up in here, it looks like.
One more question about the visualizer, Marcus. Can you export the visualizer output? It would be great for auto-generating documentation.
That would be nice. Yeah, do you guys know if we have any plans?
I think it's on the backlog. So I think with this first pass of the visualizer, the best way to think about this visualizer is this is basically what the Bicep language service sees. So when you're authoring code, there's a whole system and a whole model that the language service has to put together to understand that these dependencies exist and that these relationships exist. So this first pass of the visualizer is basically letting you see what we see. But I think that there's a lot of items that we've learned from other equivalent type features of this extension for ARM templates that hopefully will make it to the Bicep visualizer as well.
All right, cool.
And there is a handful of questions about getting the icons into the visualizer. That is definitely something that we want to do as well. I don't know if Ben Coleman is on this call, but hopefully that's enough inspiration to start contributing to the Bicep visualizer and bringing some of your UX talent to the visualizer. But definitely it's something that we'll plan to get to at some point.
All right, cool. We all right to move on to the linter?
And sorry, one last one, Marcus. Does the visualizer work on modules?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was demoing. Actually, here, I'll open up a better example of that. So here I have just my pet project, the demo space game. I have an infrastructure as code folder here. I have a bunch of modules. I have one for the database, one for the registry, one for the web app. And then I have a main wrapper file. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, and I do have an intentional error in my database module, but this is what the visualization looks like. So each module kind of has its own box here. So I have the web app module, database module, registry module, all kind of broken out. And then there's this resource group here that contains the web app and the database. And then I have another resource group here just for the container registry. So yes, it works with modules.
Great.
Cool. All right, so next up we have the new linter that'll inspect your code and catch a customizable set of authoring best practices. The linter is being designed to be extensible, so new rules can be added either by the Bicep team or the community. For this early release, we started out with just 6 rules. Most of them came from the ARM TTK, or the ARM template test toolkit. So I'll just kind of walk through, starting out at the top here. If I hover on the yellow squigglies, I'm getting yellow because that's a warning. These 6 snippets that these 6 rules that we added are all warnings by default. So if I hover over this, I can see there's a violation here. Parameter is declared but never used. So I'm going to want to clean that up. Probably remove that if I'm not referencing it anywhere. And this is all happening, while I'm authoring code. So if I have a top secret password parameter here, it's a secure parameter. If I start adding a hard-coded password here, you can see that that violation is immediate. It's going to tell me, hey, secure parameters should not have hard-coded defaults. This is going to be checked into source control. I definitely don't want to share my password all over my repo. So I'm going to want to remove that. Moving down the line here, I have an automation account and an automation job schedule. I'm here for the name of the automation account. I'm getting these squigglies again. And this is saying that I don't need to use string interpolation for this. I can simply just reference the parameter name. I don't need this fancy syntax here. So for this, I'm going to remove through the quick fix here. And if I was kind of unsure what that meant, there's an AKA link here that points to the GitHub repo with documentation, and I'll kind of walk through that in a bit here. Okay, so I'm going to quick fix that one. Keep going down. And these are also, by the way, these are showing in my problems window. And it looks like I have 2 remaining here. This one is saying, I don't need to use the concat function like I would in an ARM template. I can simply just use string interpolation, and that'll really clean this up. So again, I have a quick fix. So right now you can see the concat function here. It's going to remove that. It's going to use the interpolation syntax, and then I can just tack on -schedule, and that's going to concatenate the resulting name. All right, so if I don't like the warnings by default thing, maybe I want to disable some rules. Maybe they don't apply. Maybe I want to turn them into errors. For that, we have a bicep settings.json file. Sorry, bicep config.json file. And this is going to kind of control that behavior. So if I don't want the defaults, I can add this config file and configure this the way I want to. So we actually have, so I can open up this config and see there's these rules available here to insert. If I, let's see, if I want to change no unused params from a warning to an error, I could save that, go back to my demo. And here we go. Okay, so that feeling left out parameter, now you can see it went from the yellow squigglies to the red squigglies. So now this is an error. This is going to prevent me from building my bicep file. This is going to break the build in your CI/CD pipeline if you want it to. Just kind of walking through this config file at the top. These default rules that we're adding are part of the core analyzer. So those are kind of baked in, but we envision an extensibility. So others, even like third parties can create their own analyzers, their own rules. And with that, you could enable them here. And then there's, specific rule values. So this no hard-coded environment URL rule has a list of disallowed hosts. So if you didn't like the defaults, you can come in here, change this, save the file, and this bicep config JSON can sit alongside your infrastructure as code. Now, if we take a look at what this looks like in a real project, so I mentioned the space game project here with all my modules. I have a pipeline, I have a GitHub action that is building my bicep file. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to share my screen and show that GitHub action here. Sorry, this changing of screens is really slow. There we go. Okay, and is this zoomed in enough for everybody? Look good? Okay, so I have a bunch of stages in my pipeline. There's one that builds the infrastructure. So it's going to just run AZ bicep build, and it's going to point at my main.bicep file that consumes all of my modules for the database, the web app, the registry. Now, I want to run this bicep build to make sure it transpiles successfully. I want to make sure all those linter rules pass before we move on to the later deployment stages. Now, since there's CLI, Azure CLI, PowerShell integration, I don't need to package this up as an artifact as I would have previously, but I want to make sure it's building successfully. So here you can see I'm getting an error, and it's that simplify interpolation rule. So I'm going to remove that unnecessary string interpolation, as kind of like a team standard. I want to make sure everybody's playing by the rules, so I can enforce that through this pipeline here. So it's pretty simple. It just sits alongside my infrastructure as code, and it's going to that bicep build is going to pick up the closest config file up the tree.
Marcus, there's a question about the repo itself. Is this repo public, and can it be shared with the audience?
Yeah, this is just my personal GitHub project. I can post a link in chat. Let's see. I'm just going to post it in our internal chat, and I'll let somebody else publish that.
That works.
All right, so while we're here, I'm sharing my screen. Let's go look at those rules and the documentation on these things. So in the docs folder, there's now a folder called Linter rules. And this is those default rules that I highlighted. So each one of these has detailed explanation here. If it's not obvious, you know, you can come in here and hopefully get details on what you need. Yeah, but let's go back. And also in this docs directory, there is a linter markdown file. So this kind of goes over the basics. It talks about what it is, and then that bicep config JSON file, and the different levels. I mentioned if a rule is set to error, it's going to break the build. And I guess I could demo that too. But yeah, warnings, they're going to show up. They're not going to prevent you know, the transpilation from happening. You can still get that ARM template output. It's not going to block anybody. And then information, that'll just display with a little eye icon in VS Code. And then if you don't like a rule, you can turn it off. And that'll suppress it completely. Any questions on the linter?
I don't know if we're getting a lot in chat, so I may have just missed it, but we have seen this question a few times with people who've gotten their hands on the linter. Do you want to talk about kind of where we're at on the ask to have like a dedicated lint command to treat the warnings as errors or something of that nature?
Yeah, let me switch back to my VS Code here. All right. Okay, so right now, I'm going to close that. Oh, and I have a bad config file. Yeah, let me fix this up quick. Okay, I'm going to grab the default bicep config, just paste that in here. All right. So I'm getting a bunch of warnings. This is, you know, before I started my demo. If I go to build this, the level of these rules right now is set to warning. So that's why I'm getting all the yellow here. But the result, you can see I'm still able to get my ARM template JSON here. So it spit that out. Now, if I delete that and change add some others in here, set those to errors.
And it's great seeing the IntelliSense in the bicep config file. That looks super helpful.
For sure. Colon expected. Oops. Okay. All right, so I'm changing these from warnings to errors. You can see that effect here, but also when I go to run that build now, I expect to see some red. There we go. So these rules show up as red because they're errors. That's kind of how I can change that default behavior. And I can have multiple bicep config JSON files. Like if I have a personal one and I'm authoring this and I want everything set to warnings, I don't really care. If I hard code a password, it's just kind of dev test interloop, playing around. Then that's just fine. And then I can have a pipeline, that has its own rule set and levels. So if I want to, enforce these rules, I can add that into my pipeline when the bicep build gets run. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is, there is an ask out there to have like a dedicated lint command. So without having to modify or create a new bicep config JSON file, which I think is just something that we're talking about at the moment, if it makes sense. So if you do have feedback or that ask, there's a GitHub issue discussing it.
Yeah.
I think there's one more question on the Linter. Like, is the Linter going to replace the ARM template toolkit, the test toolkit, or should I be running the TTK on the generated ARM template?
Yeah, so at the bottom of the Linter Markdown, share my screen again here. We have guidance around that, so it's kind of use the bicep linter for bicep, use the ARM TTK if you're working with ARM templates. The output's not necessarily going to make sense for bicep transpiled ARM templates. I'm I'll post another link in chat. But yeah, we'll be porting over the rules that make sense from the ARM TTK. It's not advised to run ARM TTK on bicep generated templates. Bicep output is not intended to pass the ARM TTK rules, even if it passes bicep rules.
I'll add a little bit to that. We are working on rule changes in the TTK to deal with bicep generated JSON. So there's been a couple people, so there's quite a few customers that are actually doing this today until the linter catches up. So we actually do the quick start repo, and people will actually take the compiled JSON and run the TTK on it, while we actually kind of do that parity between them. And there are some changes we're taking in the TTK so that if something doesn't make sense to run on a bicep generated file, we will skip that rule in the TTK. So because we know what a generated file will look like in terms of metadata, so we'll actually kind of reduce the noise that way. So I wouldn't separate these concerns just yet. Once we catch up, then there'll be a clean break for people. We'd like to kind of have one story for people when it comes to the tool, so we don't have to ask these questions. But for now, it should be fine for you to take it and run it in the JSON if that works in your pipeline.
Cool. Sorry to rush you, Marcus. We have about 10 minutes left. I think you have one more demo. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool.
I'll try to make it quick. Let's see here. All right, so next we can talk about that contribution from Nikolai for referencing secrets in module parameters with the new get secret method. So with this, I no longer need to pass a static resource ID in the parameters file. When a module expects a string parameter that is secure, you can use an existing secret from a key vault. So to obtain the secret, you'd use the special method get secret. So here I have a module, a secure parameter foo. And then if I go to consume that, up top I have the key vault name, so I can reference that using the existing keyword here. So this is an existing key vault. I reference it just like so. And then to actually reference the secret, I'll consume that module. Again, I can use that required properties, scaffolding. And down here where I want to reference that secret for a parameter, I can just start typing the key vault name, the symbolic name of the resource above. And then I can see I have the new get secret method down here. And then I'll pass it my actual secret name. So this guy up here, secret name, suitcase code, reference it just like so. And yeah, that should work.
Awesome. It looks simple. It was a ton of work, as was all this stuff that Marcus showed. Marcus, thank you for all the demos. There was a ton there, and really thorough. So thank you for the overview. I'll scan quickly if there's any burning questions on Get Secret, but otherwise I'll take over the presentation, and then Stephanie has a few things to walk through. So let's do this. Teams does not like me switching the presenter. So I'm clicking on Stephanie's face right now and it's doing nothing for me, but it might come eventually. So Stephanie, do you want to come off mute and start presenting, and hopefully it'll switch over to you?
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Alex. So something that we're trying to implement soon is community calls. So starting next month, so like early July or so, we're going to have these community calls to allow our users to connect with our engineers and PMs in a more intimate, personal way. This is a way for for users to be able to address issues that they want to share with our team and talk about it one-on-one, and of course to build community. So how we're going to do it, it's going to be a monthly Teams call. We're going to try to find a good time that that works for most time zones, but we might just have to change this time every month so that, you know, some people in New Zealand can join and some people in, you know, Europe can join as well. How we're going to do it, also, we're going to publish a GitHub issue. And so within that issue, you can put in your comments of all of the things that you want to talk about, and we will add that to our meeting minutes. If they can't be addressed, we will push that off to the next month, or we'll figure that out. And we will send it out in an email on our mailing list. I put up a link in the chat a little while ago for being able to join that as well. But we will put updates and announcements in our Twitter and Yammer, whatever you're following right now. Okay.
Cool.
And Bicep doc improvements. So something that we haven't really announced yet, we are moving everything from GitHub to Microsoft Docs. We want your feedback. Is there anything that you don't like about that? Anything you like about that? We did a lot of research and found that the benefits outweighed, you know, keeping everything in either GitHub or both. So if you could see on the left-hand side, in Microsoft Docs, there's a much simpler table of contents to navigate, and people have noticed that they want a more quote-unquote official documentation within Microsoft, and a lot of people thought that GitHub is just harder to navigate with all the folders and files. Not a lot of people understood how to click within all of those different folders, and within Microsoft Docs there are a lot better organized files. We have some awesome content developers being able to help us with this, and they put in a lot of time to make sure that everything here is super organized and super easy to navigate. Please, yeah, let us know your thoughts on this. We are really excited to move everything to one area, and you can still be able to submit requests to edit. We still have that community. We want you to be able to help us out as well.
Cool, thanks, Stephanie. And then you may have mentioned this already, but community members will still be able to contribute to these docs, correct?
Absolutely.
So there's a little more process around it. You're basically going to be held to a higher standard than the garbage that we let you pass through with in the repo that we manage. So the docs will be better quality, but there is a little bit more process to doing contributions there. But we'll make sure it's easy for people to learn how to contribute for those that are interested in doing that. Cool. We have someone saying, hurry up with the move to docs. So hopefully people are going to appreciate this change. Cool. All right. So we just have a few minutes left. I did want to, sorry, Marcus, we're going to look at your face for the rest of this call. For future releases, obviously today we've released 0.4, which we're excited about, but we're not stopping. So we have an 0.5 release that we're tentatively planning for August. The major thing that we're focused on is having the ability to create private module registries in addition to us having a public module registry. So the public module registry for Microsoft and community members to publish kind of canonical modules for particular resources or sets of resources. And then the private module registry is for teams, cloud architecture teams or cloud centers of excellence, those sorts of things, to be able to provide modules internally within an organization. So that'll be a really positive change for just sharing code and code reuse instead of having to have it be in your repo. Linter vNext. So Marcus and Brian already touched on some of this. We do want to have TTK parity where it makes sense. So any rule in TTK that should be in Bicep will be in Bicep, so that you can confidently run the Bicep linter and know that you're compliant with what the TTK checks for, as well as having an extensibility point so that people can add their own linting rules, whether those are contributed back to the core linter or as kind of a separate analyzer or something that is just like a private linting rule for a particular organization. This third bullet of passing resources between modules, it's a little bit nuanced, but a pattern that we've seen quite a bit of is basically outputting the name or the ID of a resource in one module and then reconstructing that reference in another module with the existing syntax. And that just ends up being a lot of like ceremony and boilerplate code. And we want you to be able to pass resources as like native entities between modules so that it's really easy to just pull a property from a resource that was created in another module. There's a long detailed GitHub issue. It's a two-parter. That's how epic the issue is. So you can get a sense of what's coming there, but we think that'll be a really positive change. And then we do have another external contribution. So Mikolai is hard at work on more functions for Bicep. This one's called load text content. And the idea is you can bring in an external file like a script file or a cloud init YAML file or something like that. And we'll inject it into the template as a properly escaped string. So it makes it so that if you have like a deployment script, you can reference an external file without having to stage it to some public URI. So that one should be pretty cool. Tentatively, this is subject to change, but we think that after our 0.5 release, we'll have the right things in place to get to a 1.0 in our next release. So 1.0 roughly in October. 1.0, what comes with 1.0 is really a stricter breaking change policy. So we've said since 0.3 that we don't, we're trying to avoid breaking changes where we can, but we're still open to doing them. So there may be a few breaking changes that we make on the way to 1.0 that will message clearly and roll out slowly. But once we get to 1.0, we'll have some stricter rules for having breaking changes and only doing them in major releases. So 1.0, you can be confident will never break because it'll have a strict breaking change policy. As part of that, we'll also do type updates out of band. So without having to update your Bicep version, you'll be able to get new Azure types. So every day there are new Azure resources and API versions. We're going to make it really easy to get those type updates without having to do a full Bicep update, and we'll make sure that those type updates are backwards compatible with previous Bicep versions. And then the last one is we're going to have a preview of extensibility for Bicep, the ability for Bicep to create non-Azure resources. The scenario is very focused on deploying Azure solutions, so it's not going to be kind of a broad anything goes extensibility story. It'll be focused on particular things like creating AAD objects or deploying Kubernetes deployments on existing clusters, that sort of thing. So that'll be pretty interesting, but we'll have more to share as we get closer to some early builds and things that we can share and people can get their hands on. Obviously, please go try Bicep 0.4 today. You can just go to the repo. If you have the AZ CLI installed, you can just do AZ Bicep upgrade. It's super easy and smooth. If you're needing to update it in the VS Code extension, you should be prompted to auto update. You can just click one button and it'll update the VS Code extension, and then you're current. So if you have any questions, please do share them in the repo if we're not able to get to them in the Q&A, and please go try it. We were set to have a Q&A, but obviously we did it kind of as we went. There's just a couple more questions that we did want to answer if people want to stick around, and we can stare at this guy's beautiful flexing in the meantime. There was one in particular there were a few on running your Bicep code, or you're deploying your Bicep code in a CI/CD pipeline. Today you have to use the AZ CLI or Azure PowerShell task in your pipelines, whether that's GitHub Actions or DevOps pipelines or other orchestration pipeline tools. There is an ARM deployment task in both GitHub Actions and in DevOps. We'd like to update that to work with Bicep files at some point. So sometime before 1.0, I'm sure we will get to that. But in the meantime, you can use the CLI extension, or CLI task in particular makes it really easy. You can pass it a Bicep file. You just write the AZ CLI command, which is a one-liner. So hopefully it's not too much of a change to adopt that task. But that's the current story in the meantime. Any other major questions, moderators, that we should cover before we wrap up? Otherwise, I think we will end it and let people get on with the rest of their day. Thank you, as always, for attending, for contributing. You know, we've just, every day I wake up and I see like a flood of like new issues and PRs and snippets and all these sorts of things. And it's just amazing to see the ecosystem starting to grow and the community lean in and help each other out as they advance their infrastructure as code practice. So we're really excited to just keep going and keep shipping cool new things and take cool new contributions and just keep making the infrastructure as code story on Azure as good as it can possibly be. So thank you, everybody. Have a good day.